Hello, Janksters, and welcome to another edition of the MagicJank podcast, the weekly show where members of Team MagicJank get together and we talk about magic and things that are happening in magic and whatever news has come out. And of course, we end up talking about Standard a lot just because that's where we end up spending our time. So that's no doubt going to continue. Hello, everybody. My name's Graham. I go by Hamhocks42 on the internet, and I'm joined by the illustrious Carlo, C. Jr. How we doing, man?
Correct. My name is Carlo and/or C Favreau _Jr. out there on the internet, and it's been an interesting week in the whole magic scheme of things. So yeah, we got quite a bit to talk about. So I'm excited, and of course for the standard talk because we all know that's why I'm here, right? I know.
Well, I mean, it's what we do, right? It is what it is. Yeah, I don't know about you, man, but when it comes to standard right now, I feel like Foundations has added so many more toys that I'm always I find myself with this to brew list that is just insane, trying to find the angles. And it's so funny because I find myself with kind of this Rolodex of cores that decks can use. Like you can do the founding the third path core, you can do the up the beanstalk core, you can do the I just find myself kind of reverting to the same kind of setups, the best core pieces. It's like, is this a beanstalk deck or is this a caretaker's talent deck? Or whatever the case may be. So I find that kind of interesting. Actually, now that I think about it, it's card draw engines or card value engines tend to be the things I'm thinking of.
They do say if you can draw a lot of cards, your deck's probably good. So
yeah, if you find yourself thinking, man, I just didn't draw what I needed, just draw more and you'll probably find what you need. It tends to work. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm just kind of thinking out loud there. But yeah, so I don't know about you, but I have this huge to brew list and I'm only able to get through it so quickly, and it seems like a lot of other folks are taking that same approach. I mean, we have a ton of new cards injected into the format, and while we have some tried and true meta decks, it definitely seems like the opportunity for some for discovery with some tech is out there right now in a pretty cool way. So this week in Standard, so what have you been seeing and what have you been playing and finding success with?
Well, remember when I said a couple weeks ago that I thought Foundations was going to be the set that rotates Standard without a rotation happening? And to your point that you just mentioned about Foundations giving lots of new tools, and it seems like week by week we see like these new tools really come to the forefront, and decks are all changing because of said new tools, right? Whether it's a deck with the new tool or the metagame shifting to address that new tool. That's what I meant a couple weeks ago. Like, even though we clearly have like our beanstalk decks, right? We have our caretaker's talent deck. We have our black X mid-range decks because they're not all the same. But they all have similar elements to it. We both know who Go Calper is, and so last week Go Calper actually sent me like one of those tier maker things. And it was basically all the decks that currently make up what is the known metagame. And it was like, he just said rate these decks, right? Like S, A, B, C, D tier.
Okay.
And I personally don't think there is an S tier deck in Standard. I think there are lots of A tier decks. And it's because of how healthy the format is that you have a lot of these A tier decks. So, when I'm talking about A tier decks, and listen, feel free to agree or disagree with me, y'all. Comment below and tell me.
Absolutely, please.
But, we're talking of this last week, what I think is the A tier decks. And, the Zur Overlord decks are kind of crazy. Frank Karsten said if you could play a Pioneer deck in Standard, you probably should be doing it because it means it's a high power level. And when I'm talking about the Zur Overlord decks, we're talking about Zur from Dominaria United, that gets to essentially turn any of your Overlords that have been appended, right? Or your Leyline binding, let's say, up the beanstalk if you want, turns it into a creature, gives it lifelink, death touch, and hexproof, so you can't touch it, and really puts you far ahead. And what I mean by put you far ahead, you play your white Overlord of the Mistmoors on turn 4, play Zur, animate the Mistmoors, you get to attack with the tokens, plus the Overlord coming in for 7, plus make 2 more 2/1 flyers. That's crazy powerful.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, you literally have to sunfall that board afterwards, and that
Mm-hmm.
means you got to hope that you are playing a deck that has sunfall in it, or Day of Judgment or something like this. And that is so powerful. So you know, talking about A tier decks, you know, clearly I think the Overlord deck is there. Um, Definitely some flavor of Dimir midrange is for sure there. I think Dimir midrange right
Mm-hmm.
now is like the top played deck archetype in the format. Um, but what's so interesting is there are different flavors of Dimir midrange.
Mm-hmm.
You could be playing the deck that's playing multiple Enduring Curiosities, right? That is the significantly better Bident of Thassa card that says whenever a creature deals damage, you draw a card. And hey, if you kill the creature, it comes back as an enchantment. So it doesn't really go away. Um, you know, so that's taking
Yeah.
advantage of cards like Fairy Mastermind and Spyglass Siren. Some of the decks are playing Kaito from Duskmourn,
Mm-hmm.
and it's got your great removal package, but it doesn't really have a control element to it. I mean, yeah, it's playing some number of Phantom Interference, maybe some 3 steps ahead, maybe some negates in the sideboard, but it's your true mid-range grindy
Mm-hmm.
Dimir deck. But then there's the Dimir Demons deck. Remember from Worlds?
Ah, yes.
That was playing Doomsday Excruciator, and playing Jace the Perfected Mind and having a mill strategy. You know, those flavorful Dimir decks are out there and they are way different than the Enduring Curiosity decks. Um, but I think one thing stays true, and that is the Black X mid-range decks, sort of the king mid-range decks in the format, because
Mm-hmm.
black cards are very powerful.
Oh yeah.
Um, so, you know, taking a look at either Golgari or Demir, they do similar things. So, you know, they're on that A tier strategy for me as well. Um, and then, like you mentioned, the Caretaker's talent decks, right? So, whether that's
Yep.
mono white tokens, if you really want to give it that name, it's really mono white Caretaker's talent. Yes, you win with
It's
tokens, but,
caretaker. Yeah. However,
and
whatever token generators you put around it, caretaker's talent
yeah,
just carries it. Like, yeah, I've seen people using Heir Apparent with this. I've seen it with just the like a hop to it even, or like the white overlord. Like
yeah,
whatever your token generator of choice is, caretaker's talent just holds the whole thing together because it's your card draw
yeah.
engine. It's even making you tokens at certain, at chapter 2, and it's the anthem, overrun that to end it. It does everything. It's the whole game plan right there
Yeah.
on one card. It's wild.
And if we remember, you know, this card or this deck variant went away in Duskmourn Standard. It was a
Mhm.
clear front runner in Bloomborough Standard. Um, and you often played it red white and you took advantage like Urbrask's Forge plus
Yep.
Caretaker's Talent.
Oh, those Boros
Um,
tokens decks were no joke. Yeah.
yeah, and when Duskmourn came out for the short 7 weeks that we had it before Foundation's release, um, you saw the Caretaker's Talent deck essentially go away, and people were trying a bunch of other strategies. And then all of a sudden, Foundations comes out, and bam, Caretaker's Talent is back in mono white fashion,
Hmm.
because you know doesn't need Urbrask's Forge to do anything. Um, Interestingly enough, though, I've been seeing some of these mono white Caretaker's Talents decks splashing blue for Jace the Perfected Mind,
Hmm.
because it turns out milling your opponent for 15 cards is very good when you're playing against both Domain or the Zerlord's deck, or the mono white mirror match, because somebody is going to deck out, right? You figured that you are both drawing cards.
Mhm.
Your legit win condition comes from a possible mill strategy. Um, so I've been seeing that as a pretty commonplace.
Yeah.
Some of the decks that don't want to splash blue are actually playing Realm Breaker in their sideboard
Ooh.
for the same reason that you would play Jace the Perfected Mind, simply to mill your opponent and make sure that you are land ahead of them. No cool Praetor reanimating or searching for strategies, but you know, milling for 3, stealing a land allows you
That's
to ramp and
that's
lets
still
you to
pretty
like
good.
caretakers plus pump and all of that type of stuff. Yeah. Um, so that's what I've been seeing a lot. So I would consider
Nice.
like these decks and probably a red deck variant as your last like A tier of the
Yeah.
format.
Definitely. I've
Um,
been seeing those mice decks everywhere on the ladder, and they're able to just pump out so much damage. I know Leyline of Resonance getting banned definitely uh, removed the like turn 2, oh, I guess I don't get to play
Or
game.
best of one, yeah.
So yeah, but we're right, only in best of one. But even
Yeah.
so, even without that, I mean, the turn 1 Heartfire Hero into turn 2 Manifold Mouse, it's nuts. Like, so, and then
Yeah.
you follow that up with some other support. It just, yeah, the amount of damage that thing can pump out, other aggro decks just can't keep up with it. It's kind of nuts. Yeah.
Yeah, so like similar to the Dimir deck, how there's different flavors of it. There's
Hmm.
definitely different flavors of the red decks. So whether you're playing straight mono red, which is more consistent mana, or you're playing
Hmm.
like questing red, which is only splashing green for like questing druid or seek the beast part of it,
Mm.
plus some Paul Patch formations or something in your sideboard. Um, or you're playing Boros and you're taking advantage of the Aura strategy, taking advantage of like Sheltered by Ghosts, which is probably the best removal spell in Standard,
It's
in
so
my
good.
opinion. It gives you,
Yeah.
it has so much play, and it's really what makes your red deck better than your opponent's red deck,
Yeah.
because you give your creatures lifelink.
For aggressive
uh,
strategies, this is yeah, it's insane.
yeah.
Yeah,
And you
it's
got to
fantastic.
save your Sheltered by Ghost for this opposing Screaming Nemesis,
Exactly.
which is
Yeah.
like crazy bonkers of a card too. So, um,
Yeah.
again, multiple red deck flavors. All of them are up there. Um,
Yeah. But I think it's really interesting, and I'm inclined to agree because you just mentioned, 4 different decks that appear right now to be kind of top of the heap. Well, and funnily enough, like the Abhorrent Oculus, like or Azorius deck is, I don't know that it's necessarily up in that A tier right now. I know it has been, and I know it's
mhm.
it's kind of knocking at the door, so it's arguably in that mix as well. So
Yep.
just the sheer volume of decks that we're talking about, I can't think of any one that stands up as head and shoulders stronger than all the rest of those consistently. I mean, but every one of them has their ideal matchups, and so there are certain decks where I know I fear certain matchups over others. Um, but yeah, I'm inclined to agree. We don't have really an S tier deck. There isn't an Esper Legends, or there isn't a for a minute there, that Boros Caretakers deck in Bloomborough was pretty up there, I'd say.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, right now I completely agree with the premise that right now we just don't have that, and we have a pretty dynamic rock paper scissors format, and
Hmm.
it's interesting because yeah, there are a lot. It's funny because the general power level of Standard is very high, much higher than it used to be, no question.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I have so many times where I look at an individual card and go, "How did that get printed? That is so busted." But there are dozens of those, and so as a result, they all just even out. It's funny. One deck that I've been trying to make work recently is elves. I've been tinkering with elves a little bit,
Oh
and
yeah.
and in general, I think that they're not quite there yet. Like, I don't think that we have a good, even necessarily B tier elf deck. But if you want to have some fun, turn in some
Yeah.
nostalgic elf sideways, you can do it. And the thing for me, I found some success when I kind of shifted the paradigm and accepted, in order for me to win, I need to win more. And so I had cards like the Elvish Archdruid and Tyvar and the
Mm.
Banner of Kinship, these cards that are just so over the top. They should be ridiculous. But the moment I added those, I was able to punch through the lifelink blockers. I was able to generate
Yep.
enough mana despite some chump blockers and removal to make it still work, like more often than not. It's like, oh,
Yep.
when the power level ramps up, I got to ramp with it. And all of a sudden, the definition of winning versus winning more, I think a lot of us, I know myself, I need to recalibrate where the win more threshold is, because that's just winning
Mm.
now. It's kind of
And
wild.
but honestly, with strategies like that, like
Hmm.
elves or trying to make an elf strategy work, it's sort of like twofold. One, you need to be able to go over the top of the other aggro decks,
Hmm.
while at the same time understanding that, current standard was designed this way. Printing Pyroclasm and Duskmourn
Yep.
definitely wasn't a miss, right? They're like, Pyroclasm might not be good now in Duskmourn standard, but we're going to give all of these aggressive strategies a little bit of a heap of power since mid-range has
Hmm.
been king for so long. where you're going to need to have answers to the aggressive strategies. Now,
Yeah.
Pyroclasm allows you to have an early enough threat against decks like Elves so they don't overpower you.
Hmm.
While at the same time, remember, we have Brother Soden that is in Brothers War, right?
Yep.
So that deals 3. And in Foundations, they gave you Slag Storm, which is 3 to all creatures
Yes.
or 3 to each player for 1 double red. And that was key too, because in the summer when Standard will rotate in July, Brotherhood End is going to rotate, right?
Hmm.
We lose the oldest set in Standard in rotation in the summer will be Wilds of Eldraine, right? So that set
Hmm.
forward, you lose 5 sets with this rotation because of Aftermath, remember? And
Right.
so
Yeah.
it's interesting how it seems that they, since Karlov Manor, right? That was the first set they took into account 3 years extended Standard. So, um, taking that design element into consideration, we could have an overpowered elf deck because you could play exactly all the cards that you are now. There are
Hmm.
technically like 4 elf lords in Standard, right? There's Elvish Archdruid, there's Imperious Perfect,
Yep.
there's Leaf Crown Visionary, I think it's the double green
Yep.
creature from
That's the
Dominaria
one.
United. Um, and then you have Dwynen, which is uncommon in Foundations if you want to go up to 4.
Right. Forgot about that.
Adaptive Automaton is standard legal in Foundations, so you could play that if you wanted.
I
And
suppose.
if you wanted to get frisky and splash blue, you could play Mockingbird and have that copy a Lord but be flying. Um,
That seems good.
so and then Patchwork Banner, right, is an artifact that
Yep.
pumps all +1/+1 to certain creature types. Um, so there are so many Lord
Hmm.
effects that you need the early sweepers to make sure they don't get out of control.
Right.
So you don't have those. Your elf deck would probably be way up here and
Oh, for
contending with
sure.
the best of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and right now, I mean, we've seen. I think it's safe to say at this point we will just always have 3 mana sweepers moving forward. Like the Anger of the Gods style, 3 damage for 3 mana in red appears to be something that they just want to. I mean, well, Slagstorm alone is going to be here for 5 years, so like we know that that's something that we're going to have moving forward. But we even have cards like Split Up as well. So and
Yeah.
temporary lockdown. So I mean, other colors have access to these too. They're more narrow. They always have some kind of check on them to make them
Yeah.
significantly less effective than a true sweeper at 4 or 5. But being at 3 is a big deal.
Yeah.
And so yeah, you're absolutely right. It
Um,
does cut some of those strategies off at the knees because otherwise, I mean, right now we literally have Cranko in standard right
Yeah.
now and there's no goblin deck to really support it. We also and there
No.
are a couple of other variants like there's 3 mana haste Cranko. We have Squee still. Like there are a number of goblins that
There's a
look
Goblin
like they're
Lord in Dominaria United for 2 mana that replaces
right.
your goblins. Like,
Yes, that's right.
or yeah, it's
Yeah,
crazy.
so it's wild. Like we have so much in the way of in the way of goblin support right now, but there is no goblin deck, and I think a big part of that is just how efficient the removal is. Because right now it almost feels like any strategy and this is a dismissive statement that I'm about to say that is, and honestly, this is an intrusive thought that I need to get out of my head. But I'm going to say it the way it feels. It almost feels right now like any kind of deck that requires a setup, especially creatures sitting on the board,
Yeah.
is just an uphill battle, man. It's just so hard to make that work because all the other like so many of the other threats that are playable are giving you some kind of value when they enter, or they're
Yeah.
must answer threats that will just win the game by themselves regardless of what else shows up. And so requiring synergy, it almost feels like a losing proposition there unless the synergy is very easy to pull off or is game ending if it shows up. Um,
Yeah.
you know?
And that's true for like any of the decks. I mean, hey, if you take a look at like Golgari midrange, for
Mm-hmm.
example, so many different flavors of that deck based upon like what 3 drops you just want to play in the deck. Because there's
Yes.
so many good 3 drops in Golgari, green black, right? You have Glissa Sunslayer, which is
Yep.
incredible. Probably the best 3 drop that you could play because it helps keep the other aggro decks in check and is a threat against the Overlord decks
Mm-hmm.
because just pop 1 when it connects. Um, and even good against your Caretaker's talent deck because it can pop the Overlord, the Enduring creature in
Mm-hmm.
that deck, and the
Yeah,
Caretaker's
threatens all the
talent.
enchantments. It's yeah.
Yeah, and so for green black you have Glissa, you have Sentinel of the Nameless City,
Oh
right?
my
From
goodness.
Ixalan, the 3/4 for 3 mana that makes map tokens when it enters and attacks. You have Preacher of the Schism, which is incredible, also from Ixalan. You have Unstoppable Slasher, if you want to go that route, which halves your
Yep.
opponent's life total. You have Tranquil Frillback, which may deserve a main deck slot, considering how many of these enchantments-based decks that we have, right? And
Nowadays,
that's from
yeah.
Aftermath.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm sure I'm missing other possible 3 drops that you could play, but that's a
But
lot, and you can't
I
play all of them.
you can't play all of them. You have to pick one. Exactly. And so, and it's funny because all of the, I forgot about Sentinel of the Nameless City, honestly, because like this card is amazing. A 3/4 vigilance that makes maps every time it enters and attacks for 3. I mean, it's a 3-drop vigilant titan. This is excellent.
Yeah,
Like, but
and
funnily enough, compared to like what in most decks do I want this or Preacher the Schism,
yeah,
and as far as just generic value goes, and like probably taking Preacher just straight up draws me cards. Like that's.
yeah, and it's got Death Touch. It's got a big butt, right? It
Mm-hmm.
blocks infinite things, and it can put pressure by attacking because it
Yeah.
generates you some card advantage, right? And the reason I mean, all of these options are really on the table to decide what you want to play is because Foundations gave us Llanowar Elves, and I can play all of these 3 drops on turn 2, and it's
Mm-hmm.
so powerful.
So
Any of
good.
them that drops, except Tranquil Throwback, right? Because it gets its value when you have more mana.
Yeah.
Um, but the decision making on, okay, I can play this, but I can also play Unholy Annex on turn 3
Oh
and
my
generate
goodness.
some card advantage that way. So it's the value 3 drop slot that has to generate you enough value. It's crazy to say that. The value engine has to generate enough value to be given the slot.
You know what's
Um,
amazing though? We're talking about all of the best, Golgari, 3 drops for value, and we're now 5-6 deep, and Liliana of the Veil, who's legal and standard, is like it hasn't even come up. This is
yeah.
like holy cow, dude.
And Liliana is so good. You know, it makes it awkward because of Golgari's mana base in particular, if we're talking about
Sure.
that archetype,
Mm-hmm.
because we don't have like a green black verge in standard yet. And
Mm-hmm.
so you have to make sure that you have an untapped green source that's going to enter for you to Llanowar Elves on 1, and trying to double pip a black spell on turn 3 or turn 2 is difficult,
Yeah,
right?
because
1 pip guaranteed. Two
mm-hmm.
pips very difficult unless you literally go like Swamp or Llanowar Wastes with another duel on the battlefield.
Yeah, the
Um,
blooming marsh into Llanowar elves into swamp, like, but that's it's
yeah.
kind of a magical Christmas land scenario. It can happen. I've done it, but it's
Yes.
not nowhere near as easy as something like Unholy Annex or
Yeah.
Slasher or Preacher, because the 2 in a black is a lot easier to pull off. Oh my
And
goodness.
Liliana is very good and likely deserving of sideboard slots because
Hmm.
there are some matchups where Liliana is better against, right? Liliana's not great against the red-based aggro decks, but Liliana is great against like Domain and
Hmm.
just making you plus and discard a card, or the Overlord decks rather, same thing. Making them
Yeah.
sack their largest creature, for example, is very good. It's decent against other mid-range decks. Um, so it all depends on what kind of matchups you think that you're going to be playing, whether that's on the arena ladder or let's say you're RCQing or something like this.
Hmm.
What are you going to play against most? Um,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
interesting, and you make a good point there because there are so many other very strong Golgari cards in this format. Even in other planeswalkers, right? Like, do you play Nissa Ascended Animist, or do you play Vivian Reed, or do you
Oh
play
my goodness.
both?
Fair
Or do you
question.
play Liliana Dreadhorde General? Or do you try Innkeeper's Talent Vraska Betrayal Sting? Right? It's just so
Oh
many
my goodness.
possibilities in the Golgari archetype. And the most popular one is playing demons alongside of Unholy Annex. Like, tell
Hmm.
me that they didn't want to reprint Fable the Mirror Breaker in the standard without telling me that they wanted to give us an equally powerful card. Because
Yeah.
Unholy Annex does that.
Oh,
And
100%. Yeah.
it's gotten to the point where people are playing Render Inert in their sideboards
Mm-hmm.
to be able to make the Golgari players instantly lose by removing all the counters off of Archfiend of the Dross.
I've
Um,
done that.
and
Yeah, it
and
feels
it's
great.
and it's had such a shift in the
Mm-hmm.
metagame that folks are playing less Archfiend of the Dross and moving back to Shieldred, which we
Yep.
haven't seen in quite some time. Um, Still playing some number of Archfiend, but saying, hey, at worst case scenario, a Shieldred and Unholy Annex on the field means I don't lose any life and I still draw extra cards. um,
Oh my goodness.
so, yes, the black cards are powerful. Yes, the Goldari deck is powerful, and why I think it's deserving of being on like the A tier for
Mm-hmm.
obvious reasons. It's putting up results, right? We can't deny results.
Right.
Um, but the flavor of the different builds of Golgari is what's keeping it healthy and not so overpowering. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Looking at different deck lists, they aren't all the same. There's the
No.
unifying factor behind Unholy Annex, but outside of that, it's that struggle. What 3-drops do you want to play? How many Planeswalkers do you want in the 75? What value do you want?
Yeah, what flavor do you want? It's yeah, it's interesting. I do love the Archfiend. I have one deck where if you have any combo decks out there using Beseech the Mirror, I highly recommend having the one Render Nerd in the deck that you can pull up in a pinch. It's
Yeah,
amazing. The Toolbox Render Nerd is beautiful. I've gotten a couple of wins just
yeah,
out of nowhere. Your opponent never sees it coming, and half the time they have lethal on board because that's just what Archfiend does. And
yeah.
so then to just be like, oh no, you want to tap and die. It's great. Anyway, yeah, so the Golgari deck, I love how we're kind of breaking that down because we're at a point right now where yeah, you could go up against Golgari 5 times in a row and there'll be 5 completely different decks. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of nuts. Like Bloodletter of Aclazotz is an interesting one. An interesting card for this. I just want to bring that up because if you're running the Unstoppable Slasher at 3, you're probably running the Bloodletter on 4.
Mm-hmm.
Because it happens to be a demon, um it happens to combo with the Slasher. Like if they don't have the blocker,
Yeah.
they're done. So it's not necessarily a super consistent combo. Like don't count on it. Have plenty of other
Right.
threats. But if it lines up, and you take those wins, right? And
Yeah.
so
And
it's
it
but
does
it's
make you take 4 off of Unholy Annex too.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, just so Unholy Annex on 3 into Bloodletter of Akazas on 4. Yeah, you're doming the opponent for 4 on that at the end step. I mean, that's no joke.
It's crazy good.
It's wild. It's wild. Yeah. It honestly feels right now. Okay, so here's a question for you. Do you think the color pie is currently balanced in standard?
Do I think it's balanced?
Yeah, do you think each color is
Um,
is of similar power levels? It's never perfect, but I'm just like what are your thoughts on the color
I
balances right
mean,
now?
I would say out of like outside of the Demir deck,
Mhm.
you know, blue by itself is quite a bit weak at the moment.
Yeah.
Um, like there is no control deck that exists in standard right now. And it's wild because you would think that with a bunch of mid-range strategies being on top, that a control deck would be able to break through. And it's
Mhm.
possible that it's still yet to happen. Um, but there's no classic like blue-white control.
Yeah.
And you know, a big reason I think that is because blue-white control lost the Wandering Emperor in rotation.
Mhm.
Um, that was such a strong card that enabled you to play it at flash speed, to create tokens, to be able to counter spells, to be able to play, whatever wraths you wanted. Um, you know, Albeit they lost farewell too, but I mean, Sunfall is the best wrath spell in standard.
Yeah.
So like,
Well,
it's so
yeah.
interesting because the control element to me now has switched to this mono white caretaker's talent deck. Even though it's not really like a control deck, it
Mhm.
is in essence a deck that takes you an hour to play, and like the control decks do. And listen, this isn't knocking on players who are playing the mono white deck. But please, if you are playing this deck, play faster because you will go to time in a regular Magic tournament because it's taken you a half hour to play game one. Um,
Yep.
and that was my thought that it was, trying to play the Overlord deck like this weekend in an RCQ.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I'm gonna get paired against another domain deck, and we're gonna take 30 minutes or game one. No, it's turns out the Caretaker's Talent decks all kept going the time. And it's not because the players are necessarily playing like incredibly slow. It's just that the deck takes a long time to play, just like a control deck. And if we still had cards like Wandering Emperor and Standard, this deck would definitely be busted. But if you take a look at it, like we just mentioned, right? The Caretaker's Talent deck is playing Realmbreaker in the
Mm-hmm.
sideboard to try to like make that matchup a little bit better and quicker. Some of them are splashing blue for Jace the Perfected Mind. That's what the control decks did.
Yep.
And Mono White has access to those best wrath spells. Split Up, Day of Judgments and Foundations,
Mm-hmm.
Sunfall. You got Final Showdown from OTJ if you want to be a little bit spicy.
Yeah.
It's just got the best wrath spells.
Oh, for sure. And it's funny you mentioned that we don't have Farewell anymore, which I think is for the best because when it was legal, there weren't that many like honest competitive decks that were running it. It was a lot of Mind Splice Apparatus Dirtle decks where they were trying to take a whole hour on game one and just I don't know what the deal was with that. But fortunately those have kind of fallen out of favor. Thankfully Devious Cover Up rotated. Let's go. But anyway, that's my own personal beef. I honestly think Sunfall or Farewell actually probably would be helpful right now because one of the biggest challenges is just how diverse the types of threats are. Like Sunfall is a phenomenal wrath if you're worried about creatures, but it doesn't answer Unholy Annex, it doesn't answer Caretaker's Talent, it doesn't answer Urbrass Forge. So for one extra mana, being able to answer all of those as necessary, I think would make a significant difference right now for a traditional control player. So
what card is like
I'm not
really...
advocating for Farewell to get reprinted anytime soon. Don't get me wrong.
No.
I'm just it's an interesting thought. Like would it be a genuine weapon in their arsenal right now?
Well, one card that I think is incredibly underplayed at the moment, and it has real good play against a lot of decks, is Cease and Desist from Karlov Manor. That's the card for 2 mana. It's able to deal with graveyards.
Yep.
Cease, it's hybrid black green. It says exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard. Target player gains 2 and draws a card. So at worst, this cycles and draws a card. I mean, cycles and gains life. But the opposite side, Desist, for 6 mana, says destroy all artifacts and enchantments. Do you know how good that is against the Overlord deck?
So good.
It's pretty good when they got a bunch of Overlords in play and Beanstalks. Maybe it's a little bit worse against the Caretaker's Talent deck since it's only got like 1 enchantment in play.
Mm-hmm.
But this deserves some sideboard slots in some decks right now.
Oh, for sure.
I'm surprised that like the Golgari decks aren't playing like 2 of this card in their board because it helps them against the blue-white Oculus deck or Helping Hand deck, and it helps them out against Overlords, both which are like great matchups against Golgari. So, maybe they are. Ghost Vacuum is the best graveyard answer spell in the game right now. So maybe just the cheaper threat makes it better to play that card over that. But
I guess, but I don't know.
Cease and Desist is a great tool.
I dig it. No, that's super cool. Yeah, there's something there. Because, I mean, when you think about good removal in Standard right now, you got Leyline Binding, you got Sheltered by Ghosts. I've even seen Ossification for the first time in months, a couple of times on the ladder. I don't know, some people are bringing that back even, because I guess it combos with Ethereal Armor and whatnot. So, okay. So, yeah, destroy all enchantments. The other one that I don't see people using, and I've tried using it in the past in my sideboard, Fade from History. 2 green sorcery. Each player who controls an artifact or enchantment creates a 2/2 green bear creature token, then destroy all artifacts and enchantments. It's that Cease and Desist mode, except it leaves a bear behind, which when your opponent was going to run you over with overlords, or an Urabrask Forge, caretaker's talent combo, whatever, like, have a bear. Um, this always reads like it should be excellent, and I've tried playing it a couple of times in my sideboard, and I either just never drew it or it just didn't quite do as much as I wanted. But that was anecdotal in just a couple of games. I'm curious, have you seen people trying to, bust this thing out, or is there a reason we haven't?
Well, one, I think it's because it's double green. Um,
Mm,
that double pit problem, right? Golgari doesn't want to necessarily pay 4 mana on a turn where they can play an Archfiend, right?
fair.
Um, so I think that's one reason. Uh, Two, thinking of the other decks that could be playing this, the Overlord decks obviously don't want to play something
Sure.
like this.
Yeah.
Um, and the other decks, you the only other deck that maybe could play it mana wise is like the Temur Prowess deck, which is essentially the combo deck with enduring um, vitality,
Right.
which is another real good deck that's been doing incredibly well. That they don't want to play this card either. So, you
Sure.
know, I think it's just for the reason that there are better options. You have cards like Exorcist, which is incredible from Duskmourn, right? More the spot removal for the relevant cards rather
Mm-hmm.
than a need to get rid of mass removed cards. You also could just wait till the Overlord decks have their creatures come off impending and Sunfall them, and then that leaves you
Yeah.
behind like tokens afterwards and a threat without giving your opponent one. Um, so yeah, I just think it just doesn't make the cut given the other
Yeah.
options that are out there.
Fair enough. The answer just
Yeah.
comes back to Sunfall, because why not just Sunfall?
Right.
Fair
Exactly.
enough. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Cool. Cool. Awesome.
So
So yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Did you have other
No,
thoughts
no, go
before we
ahead.
move on? Okay. Because yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm absolutely loving it. It's interesting stuff. Thank you for kind of
Yeah,
the Golgari deck is definitely an interesting, or the Golgari decks, I should say, are
yeah,
definitely an interesting case study. So I appreciate digging into that. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. So you
yeah.
mentioned the Overlord decks a couple of times. Um, I know that is a deck that is near and dear to your heart right now, because if I'm not mistaken, you actually represented that this weekend at an RCQ, correct?
I did. So a couple reasons behind why I chose to play, the Zur Overlords deck. And for conversation's sake, we're talking about the one that is mostly Bant, just
Mm-hmm.
splashing black for Zur, right? Um, so one series that I do over on my Twitch channel is called Metagame Monday. So what I do for that is I give Discord the ability to choose what deck I play for the entirety of stream, and that's based on results from the last week. So they could be decks that won, let's say, a larger tournament in person, could be a Magic Online challenge, a 5-0 list from a Magic Online league, something along those lines. And so for the last Metagame Monday, the choice that Discord chose for me was the Overlords deck. And before that, I'd not picked up a game with it. Obviously,
Mm,
I've played the Overlords in like Pioneer and stuff like that, so I already know how powerful they are.
sure.
I know the green one is just absolutely ridiculous of a
So
card,
good.
being able to ramp you lands and so on and so forth. Um, and so I edited the list just a little bit. Um, I didn't like some of the cards that were played in the deck. Thought maybe there were better options, so I made a couple changes, switched up the mana base a bit, and chose to take that to an RCQ this weekend. And so, even though my deck choice was good, and I'll tell you straight up, if you think that you're going to play against a bunch of like mono red decks at the
Mm-hmm.
RCQ, this one there's only one person in the room playing a red based aggro deck. One
Oh,
person out of 50 players that were at this RCQ. Okay, a lot of people were on flavors of Demir and Golgari, which was given.
okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and there were some folks playing like the mono white deck. It was diverse. It was diverse of a metagame there.
Nice.
Um, and maybe there was like two other Overlord players in the room aside from me, just walking around taking a look at lists. And when I tell you that the deck was strong, but my deck crapped on itself. Um, I haven't played a Magic tournament in a while where I've either gotten extremely flooded or extremely mana screwed. Like, you're talking about a deck that can keep a 3 land hand because there's so many surveil lands in the deck that
Hmm.
you can either get a beanstalk or you can play the 3 mana overlord that draws you cards. Anyway, my very first match of the tournament, I ended one of the games with 14 actual lands on the battlefield and a bunch of everywhere tokens. I'm talking turns where I cast up the Beanstalk, drew a land, then cast 3 mana Overlord of the Flood Pits. Drew the card off up the Beanstalk, drew the 2 cards off the Overlord, discarded a land. Every single card I drew was a land. Literally, my next 8 draws were lands. So sometimes the deck just does that. And I blame the Arena Shuffler, even though it was a paper tournament, because that's what I can do. Um, the very next match, I never get more than 3 lands until the 4th land where it doesn't matter anymore. I'm
Hmm.
talking about surveilling all non-land cards to the graveyard, casting multiple up the beanstalks, just not
Hmm.
drawing lands. And
Yeah, we draw extra
my
cards,
deck
see
had
like 7 or 8 more cards, and none of them are lands. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
so it was just that type of a day. I lost to a Rakdos Demons deck, a Golgari Demons deck, and essentially being 0-2, you're out of the tournament, but my buddy was 2-0, so I just wanted to keep playing some more Magic. And by the way, if it's your first time in a while paper tournament you've been to, and you don't really have a reason to leave, stay and play the whole tournament, right?
Mm.
Because your first 2 matches of the event, if you go 0-2, really isn't indicative of, does your deck work or not. So if you just want some experience playing tournament Magic with your deck, stay in tournaments, right? Like just
Yeah,
play out a couple
absolutely.
more
Yeah, stick
rounds.
around and yeah, play it out.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
you might get some advice from an opponent, right? It's going to help you for next time.
Yeah, or
And
maybe you can get some meaningful data on what's working and what's not,
yeah,
and yeah,
or
and
what might be
maybe
some
those
better
first couple
choices
of
for
games are
next
just
time.
just a fluke, and you absolutely, maybe you smoke your next 3 opponents and it's not even close,
Yeah,
like or maybe it's just unlucky matchups. Anyway, but yeah, you don't know
yeah.
that, and if you just drop and walk out. Yep.
Yeah, so
Yeah. Yeah.
I played round 3. I got paired against the blue-white Oculus deck, so the Haughty Djinn Helping
Hmm.
Hand deck. Um, they couldn't really deal with, turn 3 Overlord into turn 4 Overlord. Um, you know,
Sure.
being able to keep the threats on the board, attack, block the important flyers. Oculus is hard to deal with once they resolve it, but you just then have to just play to your outs, right? So you get your split up or your Sunfall. Um, so I win game 1, game 2, I board in 3 Rest in Peace, 3 Paul Patch formations. And my what else did I bring in? Oh, negates. And
Oh,
so
nice. Yeah.
we're fighting against that deck. I resolve a turn 2 Rest in Peace, and this person cannot cast an Oculus ever,
Yep.
at all. And so they're stuck with like dead cards in their hand. They end up bouncing my Rest in Peace, resolving a Haughty Djinn, and I just replay the Rest in Peace, and that Haughty Djinn never has any power. So
Yep.
it's incredibly difficult for them to deal with like graveyard hate strategies while having to
Hmm.
face down a bunch of overlords. Um,
Right.
and Overlord of the Flood Pit is a 5/3, so it trades with Aberrant Oculus when it doesn't have a counter on it, and it most certainly infinitely blocks a big Haughty Djinn. Um,
Nice.
and you don't really want to unsummon the Overlord because it's going to come back down, and I'm going to draw cards to find another out. That's the thing.
Hmm.
They can do this. They can unsummon your big Overlords, and then you just replay them and get the incredible effect that they give. Um, so that was nice. I mean, we won that
Hmm.
round, and then went to round 4, and I lost against a Jund Demons deck. Most certainly
Oh.
was Demons. They were splashing red for like Burst Lightning,
Okay.
and some other card. But I guess it was a brew of their own, and so um, I got Unholy Annexed out of the game because that card is incredible. So yeah, and then after round 4, I dropped because my buddy lost the next 2 rounds, unfortunately for him, and we went and got some awesome Vietnamese food down the street, and yeah, then we went on with our day. I came home, I booted up Arena, and I constructed a deck that I saw somebody who was 4-0 with at the
Mm.
event when I left, and it was an Ordzov Delny deck. And we went for a nice 9-2 run on the arena ladder to take out my rage on my deck flooding out and such. So,
There you go.
yeah.
When in doubt,
It was a
just
day.
yeah. Well, I'm sorry for the poor luck in the event. That's definitely a bummer. But
But
yeah.
listen, sometimes you just have bad days like that. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
just going to happen in Magic. Magic is full of variance. You know, as much as I blame the arena shuffler for my paper tournament losses, you know, it's just variance.
Yeah.
Variance will always exist in Magic. Um, and, you know, sometimes you flood, sometimes you get mana screwed, sometimes
Yep.
you face 3 red decks in a row.
And
Like, might happen on the ladder to you. You know,
yeah, exactly.
it's
If you
just the thing.
It's just the thing. Well, and I've noticed day to day. The other thing that I think a lot of people don't really take the time to appreciate is how different the meta is at different times of day. You know,
Yeah.
one of the things that I've noticed is I literally play the majority of my play in like the middle of the day or even in the morning. You know, my time, Eastern time in the US. And that the decks that I see are just different than what the people who are grinding in the evenings are seeing.
Yeah.
Like it's not necessarily good or bad. Sometimes I'll have, you know, I'll go on streaks where I'm getting awful matchups, and then I'll literally just wait a couple hours, come back to it, and it's all completely different. It's not that the
Yeah.
metagame has gone through a huge shift in a day. It's just the people who are playing in that moment. It's the, you know, you're walking into that room. So at the RCQ, you happen to be in a room full of, you know, a wide variety. You easily could have been
Yeah.
in a room full of red deck players, and that just was what it was. So yeah, that's an element of the variance. And I love the fact that you're confident with that deck. You know the deck is good. And so
Right.
you can very confidently say that, you know, you had some bad luck. Some things just didn't break your way when they needed to. And so
Yeah.
0 and 2 happened, you know? It's like, all right, fair enough. And I think the fact that you have the reps in and you've seen what that deck can do, and honestly, those cards are all just so busted. Like the Overlords are just amazing.
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty safe to say that that's a good deck. But you know,
Yeah.
we've seen what it can do. We know what it can do, and when you're going into tournaments like that, go in with confidence and try to identify times when you could make changes. But
Yeah.
if a bad beat happens, it happens. Yeah. And just take it in stride. Says the guy who
Yeah.
never does that. But I advise you, please
And
just do your best.
listen.
Yeah.
Last week I was playing Reanimator. I was playing Demir Reanimator
Love
last
it.
Sunday at my LGS. Like, Zombify is truth. You know,
Mm-hmm.
play with like Kiora and, you know, reanimating Valgavoth on turn 4 with Zombify,
Oh yeah.
or, you know, some other flavor of whatever you want to reanimate with that card.
It's silly.
Um, You know, I've even been trying on Arena some Rakdos Reanimator, and if I can't reanimate a big demon, I might as well Atali, and Atali will spin me into the big demon.
Oh no.
Um, oh
You gotta
no!
settle for Natali. Oh, it'll be all right, I
If you don't
guess.
have Sunfall, you lose. GG. You know, it's
Oh.
just there's so many things that you could be doing in Standard right now.
It's
Um,
yeah.
so
It's
many
great.
things. You literally somebody top forward the last MTGO challenge with a Selesnya deck, based around Collector's Cage, which is one of
Wait,
the from the
really?
vault cards from from Outlaws of Thunder Junction.
I love this card
That
so
has
much.
Hideaway, and it's taking advantage of playing Overlord of the Mistmoors and Toby Beastie Befriender and some Nurturing Pixie and Kellen Daring Travelers and Virtual Loyalty and Sheltered by Ghosts. Just your value engine, man. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
there's so many things that you could be doing in Standard right now that it's impossible for any metagame deck to be fully prepared for the swath of decks it can play against.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I felt about Modern, like 7, 8 years ago, saying that there's so many cards in the format that 15 card sideboard can't answer them all. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel that's true for Standard now. And it's not
Yeah.
because of the extended Standard, it's just because there are so many viable strategies. Um, and, you know, Foundations gave us many, many new tools to make more of these strategies pretty prevalent, in the format. So
I love
Foundations
it.
has done what it was intended to do, and we've only seen it now with the release of the set, because all the other Standard sets that are going to come out are all going to be surrounded around Foundations, right?
Yep.
Either to build upon tools that Foundations gave you for 5 years, or that are going to have incredible synergies with some of the cards that maybe aren't rising to the top now, but they might in a set or two.
Yeah. No, you just actually you took me back there with that comment about how the sideboard can't answer everything. Reminds me of a conversation I was having with a conversation I had with one of the guys who I was a coworker of mine at the time, who got me back into Magic like 6 years ago after I was coming
Mm.
back from a long break, and he was explaining his modern deck, and he was like, "Yeah, if I get paired up against Storm, I just lose." Like, I
Yeah.
just know that, like, if I get that matchup, I just lose. And it's like, people ask, like, "Oh, what do you do there?" It's like, I scoop and go to the next match. Like,
Correct.
and it was like, really? Like, there is just a matchup where you lose in during pairing? Like, that's like, that was wild to me. But
Yeah.
this notion that you just
And
got
that
to accept, and the goal is to just identify what's the matchup I'm least likely to have, and be soft to that one, and figure the rest of
and
this
that's
out.
back when Modern was fair.
Yeah. Yes, that
When
was
it was a fair format to play
yeah,
against.
we're talking like, 2016, 2017 modern. Very different from what we've got today. Yeah. This is
Now,
pre-Horizons, all
folks,
that jazz. Yeah.
even today in
Yeah.
my LGS, so not that I want to have like a Modern conversation for our podcast
Yeah,
here
yeah, yeah.
today,
But
but just being in the LGS and you're listening to people talk and whatever, and I would say we have a pretty good Modern following at my local game store. They do their Modern Monday nights, and just talking. There's a ban announcement that'll happen 2 weeks from now, like a scheduled ban announcement. And so the talk is, are any cards going to get banned out of Modern? Because in March there is the Modern Regional Championships. So we're in a standard
mm,
RCQ season right now. But I'm sorry, February will happen first. February is Portland, and then March is Charlotte, North Carolina. Those are both Modern Regional Championships. So where will there be a banning during the schedule banning that's going to affect that metagame? Because right now, the only way you're playing Modern is likely on Magic Online, for testing
mm-hmm.
purposes. So the question is, are they going to ban the One Ring? I don't think so. Are they going to ban something out of the energy deck? They probably should.
Sure.
That's what the players were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So now I feel like a lot of Modern has been more about talking about potential bannings that need to fix the format, rather than, just a swath of decks that exist. Because no longer is there this sideboard talk. Because there used to be
Right.
like 20 different playable decks in Modern. Now
Mm-hmm.
there's not. There's like 5 or 6. And that's because of Modern Horizons being used as sets to rotate the format. So not to go off on a tangent or anything like that, but the Modern Horizons 3 set had just destroyed Modern. you
Oh,
thought
for
the free
sure.
spell you thought the free spells were problems before. No, it was a set that was meant to rotate the format. They banned cards, they made energy incredibly powerful, and this card, the One Ring that you could put in literally any deck, is wild. And I'll leave it at that.
Are we at a point? Okay, now I don't play Modern actively, so I am 100% speaking out of school on this. But I'm asking questions. I'm just gonna ask the question.
Yeah,
Have
yeah,
we
yeah.
reached a point where Standard has a more diverse competitive metagame than Modern does? Because that seems like
Oh
it
yeah.
should not. Like, that seems so backwards to me. Because in my head, Standard is a 3 format environment, and Modern has 20. Like, that's just that's how it should be.
Yeah.
And
I mean, listen, for how long have we been saying Standard's the best constructive format that you can play?
oh,
And that
years.
that
Yeah, through some
even
rough patches, it was still, yeah.
I
Oh,
will take Standard game. Listen, and this isn't me just being biased because I play Standard all the time. Like, yeah, there were times where Standard was bad. Um, Modern isn't tournament that or isn't a format that I would want to play. Pioneer's okay though.
mhm.
Unfortunately, it's a deadish format because it's not going to be in RCQs for the next year, but it's coming to Arena with
Yeah, it
Pioneer
is.
Masters next week
So,
or this week
we
coming up
all
as you're listening to it. Yeah.
we all know you have these gigantic wish lists of Foundations cards that you still haven't crafted yet, but oh baby, we've got more coming. So yeah, Pioneer Masters, I'm incredibly excited for that. And we do have the early access event coming up this week. So on the 5th, so definitely tune
Yeah.
in to that. The 5th and the 6th in the AM if you're an early morning goober like me. That'll
Yeah.
be a thing that's going to be happening. I'm very excited. It's going to be a lot of fun. Um,
Yeah.
Pioneer
And I'll
Masters.
be starting
Yeah.
at 6:30 that day. So
Heck yeah.
6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is normally 2 hours before I normally start stream. Because I want to play Bring the Light, because it's about time that card come to Arena. Um,
Right?
and probably playing like 80 card piles with Yorion and Bring the Light because that's my jam. I like to do that thing.
I love it.
Um,
I'm gonna have to do some research on what's with some Pioneer decks and see what's been winning out there, because Pioneer is a format that I've been very hesitant to dive into, because the best option that I had for playing it regularly was Explorer, which I know
yeah,
wasn't a true representation of it.
yeah.
Um, and I dabble in Explorer a little bit, but I haven't really sunk my teeth into it. But I want that to change. I want to do a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, but I'll never get to. I'll never get to really dive into Explorer anymore, because it's no longer going to be Explorer with the release of Pioneer Masters. They will be renaming it to Pioneer.
Yeah.
So they won't have 100% of all the Pioneer legal cards, but from what I
And
understand, yeah, the vast
it's
majority of them will be there.
interesting. It's interesting because finally, like the Lotus Field deck that was a deck like 2 years ago
Mm-hmm.
in Pioneer that's been missing from Arena will be there, right? Because they get their hidden strings and stuff like this.
Yep.
Um, Bring the Light comes to Arena for the Niv Mizzet deck, but the Niv Mizzet deck hasn't really been played too much recently. It's sort of like transformed into the Enigmatic Incarnation deck, which plays all the Overlords. Uh, so we're
Sure.
late to the party with these decks that should have been on Arena first, and
Right.
given what that metagame was. So thankfully they'll all be there now, and so I'm curious what's next for Pioneer on Arena. Like, will Arena do like Pioneer specific events now to help promote well, the correction of the format
Mm-hmm. I
on the
hope so.
client? Because like
Yeah.
100% Arena team Ayo, just as much as you had like a standard metagame challenge, Pioneer metagame challenge should be coming soon after the release after Pioneer Masters.
Heck yeah.
Um, you can certainly do play-in qualifiers that are Pioneer if you want to keep people playing that format. Um,
Yes. That would be
so
amazing. Yeah. I think, and maybe that was the plan. I mean, maybe, okay, this is a little bit conspiracy theory or whatever, but like maybe they weren't stressing about getting a Pioneer paper, you know, season, because they were focused on getting it onto Arena. Maybe. I don't know. Yeah.
maybe. I mean, I think that whole thing honestly is the correct. I think they made the correct move in terms of
Mm,
making standard 3 out of the next 4 seasons. Because if you truly want to revitalize standard and paper, that's what you have to do. And I'm sorry
yeah.
for the Pioneer enjoyers, and I'm sorry for the Modern enjoyers, even though you still get an RCQ season. But like, standard needed the love, and organized play needed to catch up to the love that they were getting to revitalize standard, right? Having one set meant to be standard legal for 5 years means you want to see more paper play of that format to keep that set and the progression of standard relevant. Um, so yeah, it sucks that there's no Pioneer on the thing. Yes, they could have put Pioneer as the RC format over Modern, but Modern is played significantly more than Pioneer is. Um,
Yeah.
and I think you would alienate a lot of your base by saying, "Hey, we sold these Modern Horizons products, and now we're not going to give it love to paper for a year." Right? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that'd be a
Um,
bummer. Yeah.
and now because since Vegas they made the announcement that the Universes Beyond sets will be standard legal, and we get
Mm-hmm.
3 Universes Beyond sets in standard in 2025. So it all comes together. Now we
Yeah.
understand why they went that route, right?
Yeah.
So not only do you have all these products that are coming out, but Universes Beyond a part of Magic, at least for half of the sets that are released, and you can now focus on those particular set releases and seeing those cards played actively in standard because they're standard legal. Just hopefully they don't have the extreme high power level as the modern sets did, please, because we don't want the overpoweredness of that.
I'm
What
really
we've
looking
seen in the
forward to the Final
past.
Fantasy
So
set. I can't wait. I really hope it's not Modern Horizons 4. That would suck.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we had this conversation at the LGS today.
Yeah.
Somebody asked, why didn't they just reprint Thoughtseize in Foundations? Like, we're really missing Thoughtseize. And like, are you though?
In
Like,
standard?
Thoughtseize is a powerful card. Yeah, it probably could exist in the standard format given what standard is now. But
sure.
I would rather them print Thoughtseize into a 3-year set versus than 5 years legal,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
And so we were just like joking around, and I'm like, hey, I don't know much about Final Fantasy because I never played those games growing up, so I'm not into the lore and stuff like that. But I'll be damned if they don't print Thoughtseize in the Final Fantasy set with Kefka like looking at you like menacingly, right? And so then you have the Final Fantasy set that'll be legal and standard
Mm-hmm.
for 3 years,
Oh,
right? And
sure.
you'll have Thoughtseize, and then the folks who bought Outlaws of Thunder Junction can play with their Thoughtseizes that they had from the bonus sheet, and you'd be good to go. I think that's the relevant time to do something like that, right? Is in a bigger
Yeah.
set, higher like value sort of card, higher power level card in a Universes Beyond set, but that's standard legal for 3 years. That would be acceptable to me. But I wouldn't want to see a card like Thoughtseize standard legal for 5 years. That's a little bit like
Yeah,
monk-esque.
I'm inclined to agree. And I think that's ultimately, I think, the feeling for a lot of that's the beef that I have with Omniscience being in Foundations. It's not that Omniscience is an
Mm.
overly powered card. It's just the threat of an Omniscience cheese deck just kind of hanging over the format for 5 years. I don't love that feeling. If it was here for 3, okay, cool. But I don't know.
Have
That's my concern there.
you seen the Omniscience combo deck in standard yet? Because let me tell you how I wasn't prepared for it,
I
and I
have
got
played an Omniscience
absolutely.
combo deck in Standard. I don't know if it's the same one, or if it's doing the same thing. Because Invasion of Arcavios, Jace, and This Town Ain't Big Enough, you get those 3 looping, and it creates an infinite loop that mills their entire deck. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And so you can do it with Jace, but there is a black card that makes your opponent lose 3 life and you gain 3 life.
Oh, the
And
Intimidation campaign? Yeah.
not Intimidation Campaign. I forget the name of it, but it's like
Oh,
it's
no,
a
that one has a draw
sorcery,
card.
it's a sorcery, and you search it up with Invasion of Arcavios, and then you keep bouncing the Invasion of Arcavios, getting it back from the yard, and then you're infinitely able to cast a sorcery that just deals 3 over and over and over and over again. And I was just playing on the ladder the other night on stream, and I was like, "What is this?"
Was it Bolt Wave by chance, or was it? Yeah.
No, it's a black card, and I'll have to go look
Okay.
it up after this to figure
Yeah.
out its name, because it was crazy good. Um, yeah, it's. I was like not expecting it, and then I just die, and I'm like, oh well, I don't know how I actually beat this, but it was based on Omniscience combo, reenacting the crime, your Omniscience on the
Yep.
battlefield, and then doing the loop, and I'm like, this
It's
is this is
silly.
the type of jank that I live for.
Me too, honestly. Well, and yeah, I have an Omniscience deck that was doing the Invasion of Arcavios. I think is a key piece of that, and then This Town Ain't
Wow.
Big Enough is pretty powerful in that regard. But yeah, once you get infinite mana, all you need to do is add some element of bounce or flicker, and you're pretty much good to go.
Mm,
Like you'll find a way to make it happen. Like I have no doubt there are
yeah.
dozens of combinations of cards that you can put together once Omniscience is on the board that'll get you there. It's just how do you want to do it? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's that's something else, man. That is a silly idea, and that's the kind of thing where those kinds of decks, I love that stuff. I'm here for
Yeah.
it. I absolutely want to see like how do you make that work in an environment where people are just the clocks are so fast in standard right now, and you don't have that long to set it up. So how can you
Yeah.
make it happen? Like those challenges I find really interesting. It only takes one or two busted obscene ways to cheat it out. That right now we have Reenact the Crime and we have Abuelo's Awakening, which are very good, but they have their limits. Like Abuelo's
Yeah.
Awakening, it comes in as a creature. Like it comes in, it's vulnerable to cut down, right? Like with
Hmm.
Reenact the Crime, you have to time it going into the graveyard in a way that where you can hit it, and your opponent doesn't needs to not have instant speed graveyard hate, of which there's a
Right.
ton right now. So it's one of those things where it's very fragile right now,
Hmm.
but for 5 years in standard, as things rotate, that could change, and it
Right.
could end up taking over at some point. And the fact that it's just going to be in the back pocket for the next 5 years is kind of wild. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, I feel like the point that I was ultimately trying to get to is I feel like we have to have a discussion about, is it okay for this to be printed into standard, and is this okay for it to be printed into foundations? And those are
Yeah.
different metrics and different bars to clear. And yeah, I agree with Thoughtseize. Yeah, the standard could probably handle
Yeah.
Thoughtseize, but it's gonna be nice when it leaves. So let's let it
Yes.
leave. Yeah. Cool. Good stuff. Well, there was one other item that I wanted to touch on. So, deviating away from standard for a minute. I'm sure we'll be back to standard, maybe even before we're done with the pod. Who knows? But
Yeah.
the other thing that I want to talk about is a little over a week ago now. Chris Cox, the CEO of Hasbro, was on a call with some investors talking about future projects that they have in line, and apparently there was mention of a software client that they are looking into developing. Exactly how far they are in development, we don't know at this point. But a separate client that can support Commander. So the idea behind it is it would support 4-person play to cater to the Commander crowd, but it would be a separate client to Arena. I just wanted to touch on this because that represents what could be a pretty seismic shift in the way that folks play digitally. Because right now we have Brawl on Arena, which is trying to capture some of the casual vibe of
Mm-hmm.
Commander. It's not tied to any kind of ladder, it's just for fun, but it's 1v1.
Yeah.
So, and it's, and if you play against random folks just in the matchmaker, you're kind of at the whim of the matchmaker algorithm and all that jazz.
Yeah.
So I've been a firm believer that Brawl doesn't quite capture the vibe of Commander. So
Yeah.
how do we feel about them tackling a whole other software application that will hopefully kind of capture the spirit of playing Commander with friends? Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
So a few. One, I think if they're going to do that, that's the correct way to go, because I cannot ever imagine them bringing multiplayer to Arena. And
Mhm.
that's for a few reasons. Number one, um, I think there's still some perfection of the Arena client that needs to happen for the 1v1 experience before they even consider multiplayer.
Mm.
And, given previous announcements made from the Arena team, they had said that they were looking to bring multiplayer to Arena, but there's no timeline. So whether or not that means they're actively working on it, who knows?
Mhm.
They did show us an alchemy card in the past. It was like some
Juggle the
juggle
performance.
card, yeah,
Yep.
which referenced multiplayer by having text
It,
that says,
it hints
to
at
the
it.
person to the
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
So maybe that was just a little teaser, like saying, "Hey, these are things that we are thinking about. So let me just give this card this text that can be altered at any time because it's digital." Um, you know, but if you brought Commander to Arena, they wouldn't be able to play the alchemy cards, so this card wouldn't matter unless you enabled multiplayer Brawl, which is its own format with alchemy cards, or
Yeah.
Historic is anyway on Arena. So, and listen, more ways to play Commander is never bad, right? It's always great when there's more ways to play Magic with your friends.
100%.
Okay. Um, but I wonder how they would work out logistics with that, right? If you made a new client, well, what about all the cards everybody already has on Arena? And if you make another Arena-like client for multiplayer, does that mean people have to reinvest in cards they already own on the one client on the new client? How does that work?
I mean,
And
probably,
listen,
right?
you could
Yeah.
you could if you wanted now, you could play Commander on Magic the Gathering Online,
Mhm.
and they have a whole Commander start kit that you can get. Um, and I think it was, I don't know how much it cost, but it was affordable.
Mhm.
Um, but that's something you could do on Magic Online at any time, and Magic Online does deals where they do like all access passes for people to be able to buy for like a week. So if you wanted to just download Magic Online and buy an all access pass for a very reasonable price, and you just want to jam Digital Commander with your friends for the weekend, you could do that on that client. It very much so exists. And it doesn't have alchemy cards, obviously. So you'd be
Hey.
able to play with what you want it.
Yeah.
Um, so if the idea is to recapture the Commander community, with a digital client, I don't know how successful it would be. And the reason I say that is because people are
Hmm.
pretty content with either playing Commander in person, whether they're at people's homes or at your LGS, or they are also content with playing via spell table. So if you're going to make improvements to spell table because it needs a couple. Um, and we know that like the largest community groups. I mean, hey, take a look at the Lobby Pristine, for example. Amazing
Mm.
community over there on Discord, and they run community play groups all the time. Lots of your favorite Commander content creators run play groups on Spell Table all the time. And yeah, I was going to mention something. I won't
So
mention what I was going to mention next because I don't want to get myself in trouble. Um,
it's
but
all
those
good.
those are the spots where that sense of community is. You don't necessarily have that if you're just joining random multiplayer games on your own digital client, right?
Right.
A lot about Commander is like the social aspect. For me anyway, I'm playing casual Commander, So for me, it's the social aspect, sitting, playing with my friends, having conversations, BSing
Absolutely.
around for an hour or two, seeing how many games that we can get in. You don't have that by having that format on a digital client. In the same way that you don't have it with Brawl now on Arena,
Yeah.
right? Like yes, you can hang out and you can have like content creators build decks with their community to play against the Hell Q on Arena or whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
Um, and
Yeah.
that's fine. That works for folks.
Well, and it's funny right now. The only time I play Brawl is when I'm doing viewer battles on my stream.
Yeah,
And we can have a little bit of banter afterwards, and people can show off fun tech, and like, and
yeah,
it feels a little bit more social. It's getting a little bit more of that, and that's what I feel like Brawl is good for.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I guess it's funny. Yeah, you mentioned us building out more features of Spell Table would probably just
yeah,
maybe address the issue. What if they made, okay, so instead of a digital client where you had another collection that you had to manage and all of that associated with it? Because it sounds like that's what that is. It sounds like what they're looking at here, at least with the very little high level viewer that we know. For folks on the video feed, you now get to see Luna. Hello.
yeah.
Luna, how we doing?
She was
Yeah.
harassing me.
Of course, yeah. Oh, when it's time for scritches, it's time for scritches. I get it.
Yeah,
Um, so it sounds like it was its own client where you would have to manage a whole new collection. The one comment that I wanted to make was about those VIP passes or like the all access passes. I think something like that would be really valuable if they
yeah,
were to do this. Like, give me a subscription model where if I just give you $15 a month or whatever, I get access to all the cards and can build
hmm
as many decks as I want. If you want to do
yeah,
something like that, okay, let's talk. But if I have to start cracking packs again and start buying gems again for a whole other client, I'm gonna be a little salty about it. That's kind of my
yeah,
feeling there. But Spell Table absolutely does that right now. And those communities are very vibrant. And I've gotten a chance to play a ton of Commander. Also, my camera has apparently frozen, but it looks like my audio is still doing fine.
yep, yep, yep.
It's curious. Anyway, I'm just gonna keep on going. But it's so the it's Spell Table is already doing that. We already have a way where people can play Commander socially over the internet, get the dynamic and the vibe that they're looking for. Like that does exist already.
Yep.
And I think that's awesome. And
Yeah.
would it make more sense to simply boost it? Would it make more sense for them to make something like, right now on, there are play testers like on Moxfield where you can actually just goldfish a deck and you can, if you know
Yeah.
how to set up your broadcasting software, you can use Moxfield and integrate it with Spell Table. And so you can play decks that maybe you don't already own or just didn't want to bother getting your camera set up for or whatever.
Right.
Would it make sense for Wizards to create some kind of official plugin where some kind of official playtester plugin that is compatible with Spell Table and just keep that going as it is? I don't
Yeah.
know.
I
Just an
mean,
idea.
I think that definitely is a possibility. Um, I don't have necessarily any gripes with Spell Table. It's just that it's awkward sometimes, especially for the Commander like content creators who are creating either community games or like games with other guests for their shows and stuff. Sometimes it
Mhm.
has like a dark hue to it when you're viewing it on a stream. And then of course you always have like the variations of, does somebody have a good enough like camera to where you can see the cards, how somebody's
Sure.
lighting, could there be any integrations in this way on spell table to help address some of the problems that folks do have in using spell table? I mean, I can tell you for me, I mean, I have like a NASA setup over here, okay? I got like 3 monitors. I got my Luna camera that's also my spell table camera. I got stuff set up. I can zoom, I can brighten, I can do all of this stuff. And I still get problems on spell table trying to connect my camera. So like just allotting some more resources that way to improve that experience might be a little bit better. Maybe what they need to do is to make Spelltable an app on your PC and make
Ooh.
updates to the app rather than a web browser, right? To help address some of these problems, make things that can make your things more bright. And then at the same time, figure out how you can integrate like a Twitch overlay to make the view experience a little bit better. Um,
Mm.
for that social aspect on the
Yes.
on the browser, generate or on the spell table app. This is just like brainstorming coming off the top of my head, but
Yeah,
make
yeah,
like
yeah.
you said this tester, right, where you can
Mhm.
upload your deck list and all the cards are there, and you can create those playtesting hands through the app itself rather than using a secondary source. um and I listen, I love Moxfield. Moxfield is a
Oh,
blessing.
100%. Yeah, yeah.
um but make me a spell table app that I can then download on my phone and bring up all of my deck lists, right? And be able to just send a deck list over to somebody. Like there's infinite possibilities here, and
Yep.
a little bit of resources to go towards developing that type of thing. I would rather see than a separate digital client to enable people to play Commander.
Yeah. I completely agree because at the end of the day, I think no matter how you slice it, there is a need. There's a
Right.
desire to enable commander play in as many ways as possible. And I think there's also a desire to have a good viewing experience for
Yeah.
streams and content around it. So, because that's the biggest thing. Like, I love getting a chance to join people for spell table games of commander on streams and on recordings. I love it, but the viewing experience is a little rough right now. And if we did have if we
Yeah.
had its own digital client with stuff, with Twitch integrations and whatnot, then okay. But yeah, why not leverage what we already have? And
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. I'm definitely curious to see where this goes. If it just becomes, if it's just, if Arena into this Commander Online or whatever they end up calling it just becomes Duels of the Planeswalkers to Arena all over again, um,
Not Duels of the Planeswalkers.
people aren't gonna be happy, you know.
Yeah.
Like how many collections, how many times do I need to buy these cards?
Yeah.
I want to be able to buy them and I want to be able to play with them. And if you want to give me new ways to play with them, okay, cool. And
Yeah.
the thing is, if the monetization model on whatever this new thing is, when we see it, which at this point it's still probably a couple years out. I mean, we're not likely to see anything. We'll probably have more information at some point next year,
Right.
if something comes of it. And when you do, or when we do have that information, we will absolutely discuss it here. So please like, subscribe, follow, all that jazz, for that.
Right.
But
Please
yeah,
subscribe.
subscribe. Just keep subscribing. Whatever you do, just yeah. Just make sure the button's lit up and says subscribe when you're
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
Um, so I want the viewing experience. I want Commander to be more accessible, especially on Twitch. There are so many amazing Twitch streamers right now who are putting on weekly Commander games, and the banter is top notch. The
Yeah.
energy is fantastic, and their viewership numbers are nowhere near as high as they deserve because following a game of Commander, when you're following 4 different board states that are all tiny,
Yeah.
fractions of the screen, it's just, it's frankly, like, as somebody who is part of them regularly and lurks on those streams often, it's
Yeah.
just, I do it for the banter. I don't expect to follow the game from a high
Right.
level perspective at all. Like I know I can't. If I miss a play, I'm gonna be lost.
Yeah.
Which is why we see Commander shows on YouTube that are successful. You know, your game nights, your Commanders at
Yeah.
home, EDH hijinks, all those. They have a lot of editing to make it as as palatable and easy to follow as possible. They work really hard to make those
Right.
shows palatable, and they have to make Commander easy to follow and engaging. And don't get me wrong, they do great work, and those shows are amazing.
Yes.
But live streaming something with that production value is pretty much impossible, you know. And so I would love to get to a point where the Commander live streams just look better and are easy to follow. I think that's ultimately the bottom line. And if a new client can give us that, cool. But if if it's also another client that doesn't have a spectator mode or whatever, anyway. So,
Spectator mode, Arena, please.
how many more gripes can I dig up here? But anyway,
We're asking nicely.
We are asking nicely, please. We've been asking for 5 years. We're going to continue asking. Spectator mode on Arena. Anyway. But yeah, so interesting stuff. I'm curious to see what comes of it. Is really kind of where I land on it. I definitely want to see what comes of it. So cool. Good stuff. That covers all the topics I had today. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we bring it in for landing?
Just ready for another magic-filled weekend. Hey y'all, if you are going to PAX Unplugged, I'll be there Friday and Saturday, playing different events. If you were there, come say hi. I do have like one of those creator passes, so I'll be around playing lots of games with people. On Friday, I'll be playing. Gavin Verhey is hosting an event called PAX PACKS Unplugged. So I don't know what's involved in that, but I signed up for it anyway. And then Saturday, I'm playing in a standard tournament for a big card. Because, this Galta and Oko behind me aren't enough. I need more. So we're going to... Listen, if I can get to a goal where I can fill up the whole wall and, frame them all next to each other, that would be fantastic. So we're going to be on the quest of coming home from PAX Unplugged with a big card. And then Sunday is my store championships that are standard. So
nice.
Going to be another magic-filled weekend.
Heck yeah. Love it. Yeah, I'm going to be doing some research on Pioneer, what the Pioneer metagame looks like, because Pioneer Masters is going to be coming in, and I want to be ready. And there's a good chance that I will be doing some brews in Pioneer as well, because right now I've been having a blast doing all kinds of weird jank in Standard, and actually one thing that I'm focusing on recently is submitting more deck text to my YouTube channel. I'm trying to get that going, and I've been making a point of posting there couple times a week, which is something that I've kind of let slip over the years, and I just want to dive back in because I'm coming up with all kinds of weird decks on stream that are varying quality, and why not share them on that platform too?
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm making all kinds of decks all the time. A lot of them are failures, but those can be fun learning experiences, and there's can be goofy plays there too. So there will probably be some Pioneer decks in the not too distant future getting posted over there. So during Pioneer Masters, their early access event, there's a non-zero chance I'll be, recording some stuff and getting some deck text going there. So hopefully, hopefully I'll find some success in all there and all that stuff. I don't know, but groovy cool. That's my big event.
Awesome.
Other than that, I'm also thinking about starting streaming Final Fantasy VI at some point in the not too distant future, because I love that game and I want to be ready for the Final Fantasy set coming out next year. And I know it's going to take me a while, so that might happen too. All right.
That's awesome.
Good stuff. But yeah, so we have the Pioneer coming up, and you mentioned a lot of events coming up this weekend. PAX Unplugged sounds good. I'm going to be very jealous. I'm going to be watching all the coverage and just wishing I was there, because it sounds like it's going to be a great time. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, thank you, dear listener, for joining us. We definitely appreciate it. I'm tired, so I'm going to kind of peter out awkwardly. But we're going to be back next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. We look forward to seeing you then. Check out MagicJank.com for all your magical needs for single sealed products, magic apparel. It's also a marketplace where you can sell those kinds of things as well. So we'd appreciate it if you check that out. Anyway, thank you so much. We appreciate you, and we'll catch you on the next one. Later.